Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me again. I am super excited to welcome here Michael, who is one of our platform engineering ambassadors, contributor to platformengineering.org, wrote probably one of my favorite articles of, I think it was last year. It's all blurry
It
about
was.
now. Yeah, last year already. Terrifying thought. Awesome article on ROI, which we put in Platform Weekly, of course. And now he's going to join me today to talk a bit about things like measurement, things about self-reporting, basically have a deep discussion on the state of platform engineering and how platform engineers are all liars. So we're going to delve into that a little bit. So, I like to just jump straight into the very first question. So in the report, we asked a question on how platform engineers are looking at metrics. How are they gathering metrics? And 40.8% said DORA, unsurprising. 31% just talked about time to market. 14.1% said space. 7% said some form of other. But then I think the kind of the shocking headline number here, which is the thing most people want to talk to me about, is the we do not measure. 29.6% of all platform engineering teams do not measure. And this is something you mentioned to me right before the call. And I kind of wanted to jump into that and get your thoughts on the types of metrics that the ones who are measuring are even looking at. But then also, like, how can we not be measuring? Like, what does that mean that they're not measuring?
Well, first of all, Sam, thanks for having me and pointing out the article. And although I do not fully agree that they're all liars, however, self-reporting can be quite hard for people to do. But evidence-based data doesn't lie when making informed decisions. So it's important to select metrics carefully. So I read your piece, the volume. It's a great volume, actually, and these groups that you pointed out are quite striking to me indeed. When we're talking only about measurement, the question is, are we actually analyzing it? Right. So, for example, in my article, what I pointed out, we were basically measuring DORA throughput on the build server as well as on the local machines. So looking at, for example, a pipeline lead time, which is a DORA metric, we were able to cut these from 20 minutes to 8 minutes. That was a reduction of 60%. Well, how do you measure that? Well, you have to have a before and an after to create an experiment, right? So the experimental setup would be to actually measure these over a set periods of time where you have two different versions, the old version and the new version. And when we're actually doing this, we're able to collect observations, data points, and then run analysis on these data points to actually see if there's a significant improvement in this. And we can go into detail about this, but I'm not sure if this is the place for this. But I was also quite shocked about what I read regarding the number of people that do not measure, and also about the inconsistency that you pointed out before our call.
Well, I think maybe a good time then for me to highlight what that inconsistency is and why I jokingly say that we're all liars. One of the funny things, if you've been reading some of my social media posts recently, because it's really stuck out to me. So this question we ask in the report is, which metrics do you measure to prove success? Just raised that. And 29.6% we do not measure. But the immediate next question was, to what extent have metrics improved since your organization introduced platform engineering? And there, only 24% said, I don't know. So that means there's about a 5% delta between people who are reporting in some form on their metrics, but are not actually measuring. Those two numbers should be the same. If you're not measuring, then you don't know. If you have if you're measuring, then you have some sense. So I'm curious about that delta, the self-reporting bias
Right.
that you've talked about.
Right.
Is that something you're seeing a lot?
I mean, I've conducted usability research in the past. That's also part of my background. So talking about self-reporting bias is familiar to me. So one explanation of the delta, of course, I cannot state that it's conclusive or anything, is what you pointed out is vibes, right? So people also gather qualitative feedback from their environment where they report on. So for example, let's say the 6% had meetings that went absolutely smooth. You know, everybody was smiling, everybody had fun, the business was not complaining, everything was on time. The DORA metrics could be absolutely in the red, but still the vibes could be fine for the team. So I think there's also it raises a question of triangulating your research. For example, combining space with DORA metrics to actually be able to isolate this vibe assumption and basically run another experiment against it.
Well, I'd be curious how you approached in a team, because I do agree, and I don't entirely discount the feeling of vibes. You might not be measuring your DORA metrics. You should be, but you might not be. But you can feel. If every day you used to get this certain number of tickets, now these tickets are not coming in. You talk to someone, people seem happy, but you've just not written down some kind of score of their happiness. You feel the vibe that things have improved. So I don't totally diminish the value of the vibe. But fundamentally, we do need to be measuring when it comes to trying to pitch to key stakeholders about maybe whether they should adopt the platform or they should buy into this initiative, or whether you should get budget. You need metrics, you need measurement. And so I would be curious how you approach going into a new organization and seeing, okay, they're not measuring their platform at all. What's the starting point for you?
So when coming into a new organization, what is most important in my arsenal is to observe, right? So observing also means collecting data. It means collecting data points. Let's not talk about vibes, because of course we also check the vibe. But collecting quantitative data from systems like a CI or CD platform, a ticketing system, the amount, let's say the amount of tickets reported, the number of PRs merged successfully. For example, how many developers are able to release a feature after the first month or first couple of months working there. So you need to, and I would explain this more as a product manager of platform then, is to be able to get into the nitty-gritty details of all the reports that the system currently generates, and then cross-reference them with each other to create experiments and see where bottlenecks are and low-hanging fruit to create small improvements. And mainly start by proposing MVPs based on these data points, and then I would refer back again to the evidence-based decision making that leadership nowadays values more than vibes.
I think it's interesting there that you mentioned the idea of the product owner. This, and I don't think it's a surprise that this kind of measuring, the lack of measurement, the people who don't know about their metrics, corresponds quite highly. In fact, I'm just seeing now, when we asked around the platform as a product mindset, 25.4% said we don't have a product mindset. So it's almost exactly the same as the people who don't know in relation to their metrics. And I am curious if you think it's really that product mindset which kind of naturally brings with it a stronger focus on measurement. And if you don't have the product mindset, you're not going to be measuring, and I guess you're not really going to be able to succeed very well.
That's a very interesting hypothesis that you put out there. And the question is if that data set, the cohort of the first group that you mentioned and the second group, if they correlate highly. And I mean, if we would open the data set right now, Sam, we would get an answer.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing to delve into. That's a correlation that I didn't notice really until now, and I was just like, I wonder if there is correlation. So it'd be interesting to go check that. I think to go in on the people who are measuring, Measurement is obviously something that we both find important. The three kind of layers there were time to market, DORA, and space. I'm curious if there's something that teams are missing. Are there other ways that we should be approaching measurement, or is it really, space and DORA is all we need?
Well, I was talking quite recently with a potential client of mine about IDE telemetry. So, for example, VS Code has these plugins nowadays where they are able to pull out analytics based on your behavior within a coding environment. So, meaning that every keystroke, every deletion of a line, if you would be talking about a programmer's perspective, right, would be able to be reported on. So you would be able to perhaps hypothesize about the complexity of tickets that a developer would be working on based on the IDE interaction of the developer and the tickets or requirement content, for example. So I think there are, and I gradually got back that developers don't want to be watched, and I fully agree as a developer. However, these data points exist in that space. Why waste it, is my opinion there. But ethically, there's something, there's a burden to be overcome.
I guess that gets to something you talked about just before around the gathering of the data or the measuring and the analysis. And that was something where, when I did a great interview just last week with Julie Rupert talking around these product mindset numbers, what she kind of challenged, and she's like, okay, well, what do they mean when they say product mindset and the self-reporting bias there? And the same thing within our measurement numbers. Sure, we have 70% of teams saying that they're measuring, but how are they measuring and what's the analysis? And that would be my question on this point you've gained. There's almost a limitless amount of data and we can gather, but what do we do then with it once we've got it? How are we approaching actually analyzing that data and then using that data in valuable ways?
Right. So first of all, I'd like to correct you on the point that I made before the call was more about the analysis part, right? But that you pointed out just now. Not per se on getting the measurement or collecting it. So the gathering is the step before the measurement, actually, in my opinion, because you can gather anything, but selecting it makes it part of the measurement. So your question was, how do we select, right?
Well, it's more around, I think, how do we select, but then also to go into the next step, how do we analyze? It's all well and good if we can gather all this fantastic data of every keystroke they're doing in their IDE, but there's probably many, many examples of things like that. How do we select as a platform team what's actually valuable data for us? And then once we've selected the data, how do we analyze it?
Mm-hmm. Right, so this goes into prioritization of actual metrics, right? So let's say you have 5 dimensions here. Let's say you have velocity, security, quality, people, and cost, for example. So for my article, the velocity dimension was highly prioritized, and the cost dimension was a directional result of that velocity decrease. So it depends on the business strategy at that moment, right? So if let's say a go-to-market strategy is we need to have our features in production at least 400 times a day with that speed, and it needs to run all these parts of a pipeline, for example, then again we select a velocity and quality probably. Security isn't that big of a deal. cost is probably also not big of a deal if you can spin up 400 pipelines, for example. So it's a trade-off between these five, in my opinion, where the measurement, where the metrics actually come from that you select. And what I see in general, because DORA is, as also pointed out in your report, it's DORA is one of the most commonly used. So there's a very high velocity and time dimension there present, not so much focusing on security.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I want to delve into the tie-on point to that is something you mentioned just before, the tooling versus culture element. Because of course, if you basically you've come off of this and you think, wow, this is all great, I want to start gathering all this data, doing all these things, there's a million different tools you can use. Do you think in this measurement question that they just haven't found the right tooling? They don't have the right observability, they don't have the right kind of tracking software for helping them with their platform engineering measurement, or is there something deeper here within the team?
It's a very pointed question, Sam. I like it. I think it has to do with the team, the capability within the team. I would not go into selecting a full-fledged analytical tool when you don't have the capacity within the team. I'd suggest to start with an Excel sheet, for example, to be able to take the measurements by hand and actually learn where they come from. Of course, if you hire a product manager platform with a platform capability, then you will get this right in the box delivered to your doorstep.
I'm curious then, so to zoom out from just the kind of measurement point, you know, it's obviously a key kind of fundamental layer. You work with, you know, quite a significant amount of like platform engineering background, platform engineering expertise. And so I'm curious for you coming into a kind of a new platform and environment, we talked about the measurement approach to it, but is measurement the first thing that you're thinking of? You're coming in and looking and saying, we're not measuring, we need to get this sorted? Or how are you starting kind of a new kind of platform engineering initiative once you have stepped in?
Right. So let's just time box it in terms of deliverables and ramp up speed, right? So what I see generally, and if I look at the article, for example, this was a project that started initially on 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks of measurement, just to see what was actually going on within the CI and CD pipeline. And from there, we started the 4 to 8 weeks experiments with different types of setups. And we were able to get the buy-in from leadership in the first stage. And we had to report, of course, every week on the progress of the experiments that we were running to get further buy-in. So I think these platform initiatives are more about credibility. And this credibility is based on the data that is the evidence to exist as a platform team. So I would say the cycles that I normally see within these projects is 2 to 4 weeks observations, data collection, measurement, then a short period of analytics, then a period of conclusions and recommendations, and then moving on into an MVP stage where either multiple MVPs would be built as part of the same experimentation, and then a complete new direction could be chosen, or it is actually pushed towards a productized final version.
You mentioned there experimenting, the experimenting that you're doing. Like, so how do you decide what are the experiments to pick?
Right. So there is, again, also within science, there is a vibe, right? There is an intuition. There's a hunch, and I think looking at, for example, DORA metrics, they are quite proven in the industry. at this moment. So if you are able to lower your lead times, you have probably faster go-to-market, for example. Shorter release cycles means faster bug fixes that land in production, for example. How do you pick them? Again, it depends on what you're fixing. But what I see in general is that standardized metrics deserve more priority over experimental metrics. So let's say the flow of space. So that's I have to say that correctly. That's efficiency and flow, the E in space. That could be linked, for example, to IDE metrics. So how you use your coding editor. These are quite still experimental metrics, and I mean they are collected, but like we pointed out earlier, you can measure everything, but how does it correlate and how does it resolve into some type of an outcome that is beneficial for some type of business goal? So initially, when a organization is completely new to this idea, I would focus on the standardized metrics that are out there at this time.
So I'm curious how things might change in how you approach thinking about experimentation, thinking about metrics, thinking about what you even kind of automate and do within platform engineering. How does that change for you across different types of organizations? So a very heavily regulated bank versus maybe an e-commerce site who doesn't care as much. How is that changing how you approach experimentation, the types of metrics you do, basically the way you approach platform engineering for that organization in general?
Right. I think it doesn't differ except for the fact that some of the data might not be available freely or is accessible. So the approach does not differ because I would propose platform engineering to be tooling or technology agnostic, because I'm looking through it to it from a product management engineering type of product mindset, right? So it's about the process. It's not about what is actually there technology or platform wise. I mean, that was a really weird answer, but did you get what I was trying to put out there?
No. I understand completely. Don't worry. And I think that's the key thing that people miss is that a lot of the fundamental elements of platform engineering are fundamental for a reason. This idea of the way we think about platforms, the way we think about MVPs and experimentation,
right?
And this whole product mindset are kind of fundamental for a reason. Whether you are working at a massively regulated bank, whether it's a government organization, whether it's a company that makes containers or container ships, the principles will be the same. And that's why for anyone who's watching or listening, there's immense value irrespective of what industry you might be in versus other industries. I want to delve into another part of the report that we haven't touched on at all, which is the adoption side of things. So adoption is, often the metric that people seem to obsess about the most, understandably. If we are treating platforms like a product, if your platform is a product, then the actual users of your product is an extremely key thing to think about. Or is it? We can delve into that. And when we asked about adoption, we asked, why and how users discover and use internal platforms and platform capabilities. And 36.6% still is driven by extrinsic push. So mandates, they're forced to use it. Or, 16.9% basically completely erratic with no strategy. So there's no strategy around adoption at all. And it's something we see kind of pervasively when we talk to people. They've built a platform and they're asking me for advice, but no one's using it. How do we get them to use it? So I want to delve into this adoption side of this framework. Like, is adoption a metric that people should be tracking, should be obsessing over it? And if adoption is such an important metric, how is it something that we can improve on and drive? How can these organizations who are struggling with platform adoption, how can they improve it?
Well, looking at adoption of any product or platform, in the most beautiful and utopian world, it would be an S-curve. So it would initially be slow, so MVP stage, then it would ramp up, and then it would ease out again when there's full adoption. So that's a metric that you can keep track of, like how many users are on the platform, how many users are willingly, like you pointed out correctly, using the platform. Also, how many features are delivered on the new platform, how many apps are currently on a platform, or services for that matter. So these are important metrics to keep track of and offsetting them against the S-curve to be able to see if an adoption is delivering successful. If there's any deviation from that S-curve, there needs to be some form of intervention to diagnose what is going on with the adoption process and why it is stalling. And there needs to be a solution needs to be identified to actually remediate this by, for example, giving workshops to the teams that are struggling with adoption. Or for that matter, a project needs to be killed because the adoption S-curve is just struggling to get there. And there's no fun for any team to be working with a platform they don't have trust in. So what I've seen, for example, in my case study with the article is that we were able to drop the local reload times by 75%. Because we were using local caches and remote caches, so artifacts basically, of some build pipeline for a development workflow. And we were actually stuck with a very high reload time. And if you're a developer, you know that this time is just wasted. Some people actually walk to a coffee machine to get a coffee. Right? And then they come back and then finally the tests are reloaded and they can get back to work. A 75% drop in time means we were able to reclaim a lot of developer time, so cost saved, idling. And more importantly, and that is directional, which is hinted at in the article, but not researched enough yet, is actually the more qualitative metrics, so the more self-reported metrics that are along the space dimensions, right? So looking at, for example, job satisfaction. So I have been frustrated multiple times when I was younger, developing in these types of environments and having to wait for a very long time. And I've seen this with these are my observations, right? My own experiences. But I've seen this also from experiences working with teams that I was adopting onto the platform. And I wasn't able to actually quantify these observations. But again, my intuition, my vibe told me, hey, here is something. I need a hypothesis to actually go and investigate this further. However, unfortunately, this was not in the scope of that project. We mainly focused on the DORA style type of metrics. But again, like you pointed out, this whole world is basically a big model. So we just have to hypothesize what is interconnected and dial the knobs to be able to see if we're able to also get a positive outcome, for example, in the space framework. So retention, for example, of developers goes down. Goes up, I have to say.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I think that's a perfect place to close us off. And thank you so much for joining us. And if you haven't had a chance to read Michael's wonderful article on pe.org, you can find it in the description below. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Michael, and goodbye.
Cheers, Sam.